supporters over allegations of politically motivated investigations, including the FBI's raid of Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. I want to bring in now CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Skanga. So, Nicole, in some ways, this is not a big surprise because Trump has been so public about his desire to see Wray out of this position. Given that Christopher Wray was appointed by then-President Trump, give our viewers some understanding of how their relationship soured.
Absolutely, Lana. This is not a surprise. I mean, FBI Director Chris Wray's term was set to expire in 10 years. He was appointed in 2017 by Trump. So his term was supposed to run through 2027. But as you mentioned there, in the months after Trump appointed Christopher Wray to lead the nation's premier law enforcement agency, their relationship soured. The tipping point, Trump's fury, his anger after the FBI, executed that search warrant in August of 2022 at his Mar-a-Lago home, searching for classified documents, and of course the investigation as it unfolded there. Trump's decision to signal to endorse a new director to lead the FBI, and Kash Patel, was really a signal to Director Wray: resign or be fired. And of course, we know in signaling to Christopher Wray those options, Trump was really echoing one of the most defining acts of his first administration in those first days, the dismissal of then FBI Director James Comey. This certainly less dramatic. Christopher Wray clearly reading the tea leaves here and determining that if he wanted to avoid some of the circus we saw around last time, he was going to have to, project his plans to leave the agency. And in his remarks at an FBI town hall that we're told is still ongoing, I spoke with someone who's there who describes the mood, Lana, as very somber. He said in those remarks, quote, "In my view, this is the best way to avoid dragging the Bureau deeper into the fray while reinforcing the values and principles that are so important to how we work." He makes very clear that this is not an easy decision for him, that he loves the place, the mission, the people, but his focus has always been on doing what is right for the FBI.
And Nicole, you mentioned the firing of James Comey, which was one of those definitive first moments of the first Trump term in office. For our viewers who maybe have forgotten that long ago, I remember that breaking news. James Comey was speaking to a group assembled at the FBI when he learned the news of his firing from the media rather than having received that phone call first from then President Trump. So in some ways, Wray, it sounds like, especially given what we are reading here in this speech that he provided, was trying to avoid that, and understandably so. Do we have any additional information about when exactly that is going to take place, and how surprising is it? If you could give us some context for understanding, Nicole, because President Trump had fired James Comey, the first FBI director that he inherited. He appointed Christopher Wray. Biden continued with Wray. And now Trump has signaled that he intends to fire Wray. Wray now steps down. How unusual is this type of turnover at the FBI in the canon of U.S. presidential history?
Yeah, it's unusual, Lana, but as you point out, it is not without precedent, and we just have to look back to the first Trump administration in 2017, that dramatic firing of James Comey, which certainly took the then FBI director by surprise. Now, to your first question of when will this take place, he did not give a specific date in his remarks, but he said that he will offer his resignation at the end of the Biden administration, presumably before the inauguration in January. We should also say that it's not a surprise because President-elect Trump has been appointing a series of loyalists, to lead his cabinet, to lead agencies across the federal government. Kash Patel, a hardline critic of the Bureau, who has called for shutting down the agency's Washington headquarters, for cleaning out all of the FBI's leadership. Patel has echoed claims of witch hunt from President Trump. He shares the belief that much of the nation's national security apparatus and law enforcement are biased and must be held accountable for what he sees as sort of this unjustified, leveling of investigations and prosecutions, of Trump and his allies. And Patel has worked as a federal prosecutor, a public defender. He has a less robust portfolio when it comes to law enforcement and management experience typical of an FBI director. But of course, here not uncommon at all for the president-elect to put a loyalist in place who has perhaps a more unconventional background. He has held posts within the National Security Council and at the Pentagon during the last Trump administration. Now, whether or not he is confirmed by the Senate remains to be seen. He is someone who has been criticized by former Trump officials, including the former Attorney General Bill Barr, who had said that he would become deputy FBI director, something that was floated back in the first Trump administration over his dead body. So, in terms of Trump's playbook, this is a page out of that playbook. How it was handled by Wray, certainly more strategic than what we saw from then FBI Director James Comey, who waited to be fired. But those who are close with Wray had communicated that it is really his intention to have stayed at the agency for as long as he can. This is someone who, loves the FBI, as he put out in his statements here, feels like he doesn't want to abandon the men and women on the front lines, and so wanted to, break this news to them, which is why he chose to, say this at an FBI town hall directly to the workforce before perhaps it was leaked in some other way, Lana.
Well, thank you very much for all of that, Nicole. Don't go anywhere. I want to bring in now CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane to follow up on something that Nicole was saying. So, Scott, with Wray now announcing his intention of stepping down, Kash Patel was already somebody whose name had been circulating there among lawmakers. And Nicole brought up this question about whether or not he would get Senate confirmation. What can you tell us about what lawmakers are saying?
What a unique experience. Chris Wray says he's standing down from a job he's entitled to have until 2027, as somebody else is literally interviewing for it. Kash Patel is truly walking these hallways in this building through the course of this week, including today, meeting individually with U.S. senators, promoting his candidacy, trying to lock down confirmations. He was working under the assumption Chris Wray would stand down or be fired. Now that avenue is widely opened up for that man, Kash Patel, 44 years old, a provocative figure, a controversial figure, especially among the Democrats in this building. They say he perpetuated Trump's baseless claims about the 2020 election. He rose in prominence rapidly between the 2020 election and January 6, 2021. He has spoken out in support of the January 6 defendants, and he is taking over an agency, if he's confirmed, that has been leading all of the January 6 investigations. Christopher Wray, among many other things, has led an agency that has investigated 1,500 people for their roles in the U.S. Capitol riot, an investigation larger than any other in American history, a prosecution larger than any other in American history. It's one of the many reasons, potentially, Chris Wray has not landed well with Republicans and Trump allies, as Trump continues to deny the insurrection and the January 6 violence. Christopher Wray has had other issues that have stirred controversy here in Congress. Some of the Republicans have accused him, Lana, of weaponizing his agency, of targeting conservatives or Republicans. Chris Wray comes up from Republicanism and conservatism, and he has rejected those allegations from the jump. But at this point, it appears it has cost him the end of his career as FBI director.
And Scott, those allegations of impropriety at the FBI, we've heard not just from conservatives and Republicans. It was part of the justification that we heard coming from President Biden as to why he was offering this pardon for his son, Hunter Biden. But when we're talking about the politicization of the FBI, one of those parts of our government that is supposed to be independent from politics, what does Kash Patel and his potential nomination to run the FBI say about the trajectory of that question, politics and the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
As we watch the confirmation process play out for Kash Patel and the potential for a confirmation hearing as early as January, they're going to build a word cloud from what's said in that hearing. Independence will probably be the big fonted word in the middle of that word cloud. There are Democrats concerned that he is too loyal, too beholden to Donald Trump to operate an independent FBI, one that operates outside of the interests of the President of the United States and in the interests of the American people. That's going to be a key question from Democrats at these hearings. And we expect, as Kash Patel begins to meet with some of the more moderate Republican senators, those who, Lana, have a history of defying Donald Trump on key votes before, they too will likely press him on that issue.
That number, though, of Republicans has gotten much smaller, particularly in this next Congress. So what is just the latest in terms of what you are hearing from lawmakers there about the ability for Patel to be confirmed as the head of the FBI? Or is it simply too early? It's just that's going to be the question now that Christopher Wray has decided to step down, if that fast tracks his ability to secure the nomination.
This deprives Democrats of one of the arguments they were poised to make, that you can't be confirming people for jobs that aren't open. You can't be using this nomination or this announcement to try to leverage Chris Wray out of a job. That ship has sailed. But Kash Patel is, I think, a consensus would be formed here by Democrats to say, among the, if not the most controversial selection by Donald Trump, at least so far. If there's going to be a political hill for Democrats to try to die on, this would be one of them, if not the nomination in which to do it, because of the issue that they've already proclaimed. There's concern about his independence, about his devoted loyalty to Donald Trump at an agency that shouldn't be devotedly loyal to a president. But these hearings are also a month away, and there are other issues that have consumed the Senate's attention. There are still questions about the path forward for Pete Hegseth, the would-be Pentagon leader, the would-be defense secretary, still doing meetings behind me as the day continues. There are going to be questions about RFK Jr. as health secretary, as Tulsi Gabbard as director of national intelligence, even though her former House Democratic colleagues say she echoes Russian talking points and is beholden to Russia and can't be trusted with the nation's top intelligence secrets. You see how this dilutes the attention that can be paid to any one of these nominees, that there's going to be such myopic attention on each one of these nominees. This is going to be a problem for Democrats as they try to build a resistance when the confirmation hearings begin in January.
All right, Scott McFarland there for us on Capitol Hill. Thanks, Scott. I want to bring in now Josh Scull. He's a former executive assistant director for intelligence at the FBI, and he's the CEO of Bowwave LLC, a national security firm. Thank you for being here with us today. This news, as we have mentioned, is in some ways not a surprise. It is, however, breaking news, and it was far from certain. What is your initial response at hearing that Chris Wray has decided to resign?
I'm more surprised at the timing than anything else. I mean, Director Wray has been very resilient in his position, very fair, very non-political, in my opinion. But it is not uncommon for presidential appointees to submit their resignation.
So, Josh, now the question becomes something about Wray's legacy. As you said, in your experience, having worked at the FBI, you felt that he was very fair and non-political. However, as you just heard from Scott McFarland, lawmakers and many of the American public don't feel like the FBI has been free from political influences. What do you think Wray's legacy will be?
Basically what I just said. I think that he followed the rule of the law. He followed the ethos of the FBI, which is to uphold the Constitution and protect the American people. I think, unfortunately, in today's environment, both sides of the aisle, when there is charges against somebody that is in politics, waves a flag of political persecution. The stats I looked at not that long ago actually had more Democrats than Republicans charged under this administration. And let's keep in mind that the FBI does investigations. They do not bring charges. They cannot execute search warrants without seeing a judge. And so while there has been a lot of rhetoric and it seems to be vogue these days, it's really not palatable and it's not good for the safety of our country.
And what then is your thoughts about Kash Patel taking over as head of the FBI?
Well, I think he's going to have to answer a lot of hard questions during his confirmation hearing. He has made a lot of audacious statements, but I'm sure he is prepared to answer those in public.
I'm wondering, Josh, if you could give us some sense, given your experience working there at the FBI, what this announcement today, what the changeover potentially to Patel will mean for the rest of the rank and file at the FBI. Do you expect to see more resignations ahead of Trump's next term?
So I think there will be some media that makes something of people retiring from the FBI. Generally, the senior folks, it takes approximately 20 years to reach a very senior level, maybe a little bit more in the FBI. And some of those folks may be transitioning out during this time period as going into the private sector. And I think that some of that will be made of because of a new changeover in administration. I don't expect there to be a mass exodus from the FBI. The FBI has been around for over 100 years. It has gone through a lot of ups and downs and turmoil. And so I expect the people of the FBI, its executives, to carry the mission forward. And I think we'll see that going into this next administration.
All right. Josh School, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to bring in now CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett. Major, this news means that in both of the beginnings of the Trump administration, he is starting with a new director of the FBI, even though Chris Wray was the guy that he had tapped to replace James Comey. Yep. What are your top line thoughts?
Well, first of all, the country, I think, should pause because Congress set up the 10-year term for the FBI director for a reason, to at least partially insulate the FBI and the person leading the FBI, whoever that might be, from the vicissitudes or the sways of partisan politics. And that's not what's happening here. Chris Wray, as Scott MacFarlane said just a few moments ago, has until 2027 under that 10-year service allotment to be FBI director. He's stepping down because he knows the incoming president has already identified his replacement. Chris Wray doesn't have to go. He could wait this out and force President Trump, upon taking the oath of office, to fire him and explain to the American public why he's firing the FBI director. Chris Wray has decided to take the more politically accommodating choice of doing that work for the incoming president, meaning he is taking political signals from an election. That's precisely what Congress wanted the FBI director not to do. So I think we should pause on that for a moment. And to this larger question, Lana, about politics in the FBI, please, let's not kid ourselves. Under J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI became an incredibly powerful institution. Why? Because J. Edgar Hoover made sure to have as much information on everyone in politics, including the President of the United States, and use it in political ways to the FBI's aggregated benefit. There's a long history that anyone can read books about this, do any quick internet searches. The FBI has tried since the J. Edgar Hoover era to try to be less obviously political. And as our previous guest just mentioned, it does lots of investigations and only executes search warrants. Let's talk about the one that is in the Trump world is most objectionable, the search warrants executed at Mar-a-Lago. Those didn't happen because the FBI invented the idea of executing a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. The Justice Department tried to negotiate with former President Trump over the documents there, couldn't get it resolved, spent months and months trying to do that, went before a judge said, yes, this is a problem, it possibly violates the law, here's a search warrant, FBI, go execute it. The FBI did nothing on its own in that case, yet it became vilified within the Trump world for doing what a judge instructed the FBI to do in consultation with the law and the Justice Department. So accusations of politicized FBI don't necessarily mean it is, but have become part of the characterization of the FBI and certainly of Christopher Wray, even though, as you accurately said, he was once ago President Trump's choice to lead the Bureau. No longer.
Major, I'm so glad that you brought the FBI back to its historical foundation with J. Edgar Hoover, because the building, the legacy of Hoover lives on in many ways. And the idea that it was always free and above board from politics doesn't reconcile itself with what we know to be historically true.
Right.
But that said, there was a long period after Hoover's very long term in heading up the FBI, in which we saw an FBI that felt less political.
Right.
How did that transition happen?
Where FBI directors tried to say, we're not J. Edgar Hoover.
Right.
We're not going to be that bad old thing that the FBI became. We'll take all the power that the FBI accumulated under J. Edgar Hoover's watch, but we're not going to be as muscular. We're not going to have as many sharp elbows. We're not going to warn people about all the things we know about them and try to intimidate them in the way Hoover did.
And now we're looking at Kash Patel potentially taking on the head of this agency that has the potential to not only have so much influence, but also to wield that power in ways that may not be for the best benefit of people in this country. What has Patel said about how he wants to run the agency?
So Kash Patel has said that lots of people should be prosecuted, people who said things that were condemning of or highly critical of former President Trump. There's a very long list. You can look it up online. Members of Congress, former members of the military, some in the media, et cetera. He's going to be asked about that. He's going to have to answer as to whether or not, if he is confirmed to run the FBI, he would actually turn the FBI's vast power in that investigatory direction. Kash Patel, however, and this is important, is also an interesting figure in the Crossfire Hurricane investigation about potential Russian collusion between candidate Trump and Russia in the 2016 election. He was working for the House Intelligence Committee for Devin Nunes and basically unearthed information that made it clear that some of the FBI tactics in that investigation violated FBI procedures and norms and might have violated the law. Those things were denounced as fanciful when Kash Patel first brought them to the surface under the aegis of the head of the Intelligence Committee on the House side, Devin Nunes. They were then vindicated by a thorough investigation of the Inspector General into some of those FBI tactics, specifically related to warrants on a couple of members of the incoming Trump administration. Kash Patel was vindicated, and I guarantee you during his confirmation hearing, when questions are brought up about what his intentions are or who might be prosecuted, he will defend himself in part by saying sometimes the FBI violates its own procedures, comes right up against two, or maybe crosses over legal barriers. I discovered that. I revealed that. I was denounced for that. I was criticized for it. So I know what it's like to be in this particular place. That will also be part of the confirmation conversation. How persuasive or unpersuasive it will be with Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans, that's for them to decide. But it will be part of that conversation.
And that's part of what makes Patel such an interesting candidate for this job, because he has both said that if he becomes the director of the FBI, he would shut down the FBI headquarters and make it a museum to the deep state. I think that was his actual quote.
Yep.
And that he has criticized how political he believes the FBI has become. But then he's also made allusions to wanting to use the FBI's power to prosecute enemies of Donald Trump. Do we have a sense then of how he would move forward as FBI director?
We don't. And that's what the confirmation process and all these meetings with senators is really going to be about. Because on the one hand, Kash Patel has identified a problem within the FBI on one investigation, and he blamed that on senior FBI leadership. Okay, you can replace senior FBI leadership. That doesn't mean you have to close down the whole building. That doesn't mean you have to move it to the middle of the country. That means you can remedy it by replacing people who violated FBI procedure and possibly the law, even though no prosecutions arose from that Inspector General investigation. You can also say the country ought to learn from those mistakes and not repeat them in a different partisan context when someone has the power to do so. If Kash Patel were to say things like that, I think his confirmation process would become smoother, not more difficult, but that's going to be up for him to discuss in open confirmation hearings for this job.
All right. Major Garrett, thank you so much.
Sure.
So again, to summarize, the breaking news that we have at this moment is that the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, who was appointed by then-President Donald Trump to serve a 10-year term, has decided that he will, in fact, resign early and not try to fight his way to continue to remain the director of the FBI after President-elect Trump has announced that he, in fact, intends to relieve him of duty. We know from what he has said that Christopher Wray will, quote, serve until the end of the current administration in January and then step down. We'll continue to monitor all of the different aspects of this breaking news, as well as many other headlines. We're going to take a short break now. Stay with us. I'm Lana Zach, and you're watching CBS News 24/7.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows
We need to step up and help them.
and a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Let 60 Minutes take you on a private tour of the National Archives.
So there may be treasures like this buried in boxes.
Historical secrets from America's past.
This is original from 1778?
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places. Bright, shiny faces.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Put me in the game, coach.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
The best interviews feel like it's just a conversation with a neighbor.
Hey.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask a question that is the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
To find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
Funding Cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
2 prominent real estate brokers, Orrin and Tal Alexander, as well as their brother Alon, have been indicted on sex trafficking charges in New York City. CBS News correspondent Chanel Call has more. Chanel, what can you tell us about the Alexander brothers and what they're charged with?
Well, these are really serious allegations, Lana. They're involving, as you mentioned, really high-profile real estate brokers, Tal and Orrin Alexander, as well as their